What's up everybody and welcome back to another video. Today, as promised, we're going to be doing part 2 of our two-step paint correction series. In the first video, we covered all the products that we're going to be using today, so we might not mention too many of them in this video. If you want to watch that first video, I'll link it up here, as well as all the products we are going to be using will be linked in the description below if you want to check those out. Now, today we're going to be going over the entire process, but just because this is my process or a process, doesn't mean it's the only process. There are so many different ways and combinations to do a two-step paint correction, so just keep that in mind. There isn't just one way, nothing's right or wrong. You kind of have to find what works for you, and this is what works for me a lot of the time, so I'm gonna show you guys. Before we get into the actual steps, I just want to show you the current condition of the paint. It isn't terrible, as it was taken care of fairly properly for most of its life, but there is quite a bit of marring towards the bottom half of this door panel, so something like the two-step correction that we're going to be doing today is easily going to take care of this to create a perfect finish for us to add protection. Step number 1 is actually probably to wash the vehicle and decontaminate it, but we're not going to be doing that in this video. We're strictly going to be talking about the paint correction. So the first step for us is going to be prep. So what we're gonna do is tape off basically any trim, anything that we don't wanna get compound on. If you've got compound on a plastic trim before, you know it's extremely difficult to remove, so we're gonna eliminate any possibility of that happening, as well as things like this extruded door handle. Because we're using a dual action polisher, it moves up, down, and side to side, as well as that circular rotation. So when you're getting close to it, the dual action could actually bump down and scratch it, creating damage on your client's vehicle, and we want to completely eliminate any possibility for that. So we're gonna spend a lot of time prepping, make sure everything's safe, everything's taped off, and then we'll get into our polishing stages. The tape I was using was 3M's delicate tape. All this means is that it's a little bit less tacky, so when you're applying it to plastic trim, if you end up having to leave it for a day or two, it's not gonna get stuck and leave that residue behind. It comes off super easily, so this stuff will be linked below. Step number 2 is gonna be our priming stage, and basically what this means is getting these pads ready to start correcting this paint. A lot of people will just throw their compound on their pad and go to town, and that does work, but there are a few steps here and there that can really make you a more effective and more efficient paint correction expert. So what we're gonna do is take our Lake Country microfiber cutting pad and apply it to our Rupes LHR 15 Mark II, just like that. The next thing we're gonna do is kind of comparable to a drying towel on paint. You know when you apply a drying towel to a freshly wet car and that first pass doesn't really absorb much water because the towel kind of needs to have moisture in it in order to absorb more? These microfiber cutting pads often work the same way. They need a little moisture to absorb the compound. So before we prime it with our CarPro Clear Cut, what we're gonna do is take some Optimum No Rinse diluted 50:1, do 1 spritz on the pad. That's gonna add a little moisture, so when we apply this compound, we can really work it in and make sure it's all in all the microfibers, not just in little isolated areas, which isn't really that effective. To start, we're not gonna do dots right away. What I'm gonna do is take Clear Cut and do about 6 lines in a crosshatch pattern, take my nitrile gloved hand and basically just work that in to the microfiber. You'll notice right away, because they're a little bit moist with the Optimum No Rinse, that it really works in well and gives you a good even feel to the pad. Once that's done, you can take your CarPro Clear Cut one more time, and what we're gonna do is just apply 4 smaller dots, about pea size, maybe even a little bit smaller. And now we can take this polisher to the paint. Step number 3 is gonna be the compounding stage, and this is where you wanna have a solid plan before you start polishing the panel that you're gonna be working on. Today, we're gonna be focusing on just this door panel of this truck. So what I like to do is break it up into the sections that I know I'm gonna be polishing in. That way, I'm not overlapping major areas and causing myself to waste a bunch of time. or even missing areas and creating imperfect results for the client. Either of those things you don't want whatsoever, so it's good to prep before you go into the job. So for this panel in particular, there's a body line here and a rocker panel here. So this middle section, I'm gonna do in 3 sections, 1, 2, 3. Above this door handle on that body line, I'm gonna break into 2, as well as that rocker panel in 2, and then I'll do 1 above the window, for a total of 8 passes to create what I think would be a really good compounding stage. Remove as much imperfections as possible. That way we have a clean slate to move into our polishing stages. Because we have prepped the pad and we have those 4 dots, what we're gonna do is dab them out on a panel, kind of just work as a guide of the little area that we're gonna be working in. That way you know exactly where you're gonna be going. You don't wanna pass those lines or you're going too far. The first thing we're gonna wanna do is take the electric cord from the polisher, throw it over our shoulder. That way there's no way of it banging into the paint and creating further imperfections for us to work out. Now second, we're gonna take our polisher and turn it to speed 1. This is the speed that we're gonna be spreading out the compound with, meaning you just wanna cover it in the area that you're working, basically bring it to the perimeter and make sure it's all worked in. Then you can take your polisher once again and turn it up to speed 4. We'll start in the top left corner and do our horizontal passes first. Do 1 line and then move down and cover about 50% of your initial line and continue that process all the way until you get to the bottom. When you get to the bottom, do the exact same thing in vertical lines, covering about 50%, till you get to the very top again. With that first pass, you're gonna wanna apply not substantial pressure, but make sure you are applying pressure because the abrasives or the compound is gonna be the most wet. This is when it's gonna have the most cutting power. If you're light on it for the first few passes and then push down, a lot of it's already gonna be dried up. So you wanna take advantage of it being wet, cut hard for that first pass, and then when you go to the second pass, you can start to lighten up because once you get to the top, you are gonna be doing a second pass. We're gonna go horizontal all the way down again, and then vertical, and then we're gonna wipe it with a microfiber towel, check our work, see if we need to do any more cutting or if we can move on to the polishing stages. So let's get into it. Super clean, super soft microfiber towel, buff that area clean and see what you're working with. Step number 5 is something that I don't think enough people focus on, and that is checking your work. So this is the section that we did. You can see there's a ton more clarity. All that marring is moved. Now if we move over here, this is where we stopped. You can see that marring immediately starts and the clarity is way less, as well as this back panel. So we can tell that the area that we did compound is now ready to be polished, which will bring even more clarity into it. But first, we're obviously gonna finish the rest of the door panel. You don't wanna just start polishing one area. Ideally, you wanna compound the entire vehicle and then move on to your polishing stages. Before we apply more product to our pad and move on to our next passes, we need to do something about these matted down microfibers on our pad. So what I like to do is just take this brush and basically go in vertical lines, one way, turn it, go the other way. This basically just stands up the microfibers and allows them to work properly on the paint. What a lot of people do is blow them out with compressed air, but what I really don't like doing in the shop is basically creating dust and making it land all over this vehicle and other vehicles that may be in the shop at the time. So clean it with this, it's what I do, stand them up, and then I switch pads every single panel, usually using about 10 to 15 just cutting pads around an entire vehicle. And that may seem like a lot, but if you're doing this every day, it isn't really that big of an investment on the return you're gonna be getting. Once the pad is ready to go, we're gonna give Carpro Clear Cut a little bit of a shake and apply 5 more pea-sized dots to our Lake Country microfiber cutting pad. And then we're gonna follow our exact same compounding steps for another area of the panel. work our way through the entire panel, and then I'll pick you guys up when we're going on to the polishing stages. Step number 8 is going to essentially be to follow the first 7 steps, but now with a polishing pad, we're gonna use a 5-inch yellow Rupes polishing pad. We'll take the microfiber Lake Country pad off the polisher. What I do with these is pressure wash them out and then put them in a bucket of APC to soak and then let them air dry, and that's how I clean my pads. So what we're gonna do, take this pad, exact same as the first time, apply it to our DA, add a little bit of Optimum No Rinse to the pad, and then the polish we're gonna be using is Grio's Garage Perfecting Cream. We'll shake that up, pop the cap on it, and apply our initial amount. Prime that with our glove. The foam pads are a bit harder to prime, but it is still a super important step. And then, just like the first time, once again, apply 4 more dots, and we're gonna start polishing in basically the exact same crosshatch pattern with 2 passes, but this time we're not gonna be applying more pressure the first time. We'll do a pretty even light pressure the entire time, both passes, because this is just a polishing step. And just like that, guys, we have our 2-step dual action paint correction results. A nearly perfect finish that's definitely ready to move on to the protection stages. You can see this back door that hasn't been done yet. Tons of stuff going on there. And then up front to what we did correct. It looks awesome, tons of gloss, tons of clarity in the metallic. And I think most clients would be happy with this result. There are a few random isolated deeper scratches that you could do a heavier compound on with a rotary or wet sand, but today we're just talking about the straight up 2-step correction process. I'm gonna run through the steps one last time just before we end this video. So number 1, that was our prep work. Tape everything off, prep everything, make sure compound isn't gonna get where we don't want it. Number 2 was to prime our pads, whether it's microfiber or foam. We want them heavily saturated throughout, not just on isolated little areas where you place the compound or polish. Number 3 was our compounding stage. Number 4 was to remove our product. Number 5 then was to check the work we did to make sure we're happy with the result. If we're not, we need to compound more. If we are, we're good to move on to number 6, which was cleaning our pad. Number 7 was to reapply, and then number 8 was basically to do all those steps throughout the polishing process, which makes it a 2-step paint correction. I hope this video helped anyone out there who's looking to get into 2-step paint corrections or just looking to change up their process at all. There's tons of videos out there, pretty much everyone's different angle. You can piece them all together and kind of make out what works best for you, because I'm sure it's not this and I'm sure it's not that. It's what you come up with yourself. But here's another opinion to add to that little memory book you probably have up there. If you like the video, please leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.